Happy to have you on the line. I see some people are still getting logged in here. We're going to go ahead and get started because we have an hour of your precious time today, so we want to make sure we use that to its fullest. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Pat Lawton. I'm with the Defense Alliance based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And we're really happy to be partnering with the Water Council today to bring you this webinar. So first things first, let's get some of the housekeeping out of the way. On your screen right now, you can see a PowerPoint. That's where the presentation will take place. You'll be hearing from our speakers here in just a minute. You also have a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Right now, it probably shows you as muted. Every attendee is muted just to cut down on background noise, barking dogs, lake noise, whatever it may be. It's summer after all. So you'll remain muted through the whole webinar. Unless you have a question or something like that, I can certainly unmute you. You also have a box right here where you can type your questions. I encourage you to do that at any time during the webinar. Those will get forwarded directly to our speakers, and they can answer those as they go then. So feel free to type any questions you have in the box right there. Other than that, I'm going to turn it over now to Karen Frost, who is the Small Business Program Manager for the Water Council. The Water Council is developing a center of excellence for freshwater innovation and small business development. And Karen has extensive background in economic development and is doing a great job over there at the Water Council based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Karen, I'll switch it over to you.
Well, thank you, Pat. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining the webinar. As Pat said, the Water Council based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is one of the SBA clusters, and we are concentrating in freshwater technology. And we have begun a program assisting water-based small and medium-sized businesses. And this webinar today is in response to working with that group. We provide a number of different programs, training and workshops, specialized technical assistance, access to capital, mentoring, and matchmaking. And as I mentioned, we're also working with the Defense Alliance to provide our water technology companies with information on different contracting opportunities with the DoD. So they have connected us with Ray Friesenhahn, who is going to be the presenter today. So I'm going to give an introduction to Ray. He is the SBIR and Technology Transition Manager for Techlink, and he's also an Advanced Technology Scout for Miltech, a separate DoD partnership intermediary. He's been assisting companies nationwide in winning SBIR and STTR awards for over 15 years, and he received a 2007 National Tibbetts Award for individual SBIR service. He was previously a technology transfer manager supporting NASA and has had 10 years as a defense industry scientist and engineer, along with startup business experience of his own. Ray is a former physicist with an MBA in entrepreneurship and is a certified licensing professional. So I'm going to turn it over to Ray, and he's going to talk to us about water technology opportunities with the DoD.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate that. I didn't know I did all those things. So let me get my presentation going here. Is everything coming across clearly? Can you hear me, Pat?
Yep, everything's great.
Okay. I'm going to talk about finding and targeting opportunities at DoD and give you some of the inside scoop on how to do this better with focus more on water-related technologies. Now, this is certainly no small task to accomplish in an hour, so I'm going to be really giving you a flood of information and just skimming the surface, but I'm going to leave you with a lot of tools and a lot of research sites and locations and other information that for those who want to, you can dig down deeper in any of these opportunities. So first of all is to look at what is your perception of what DoD really is. I mean, most people think of the Pentagon, but how do you approach DoD? What's your perception of that? A lot of people think about it more like a Don Quixote attacking the castle walls, getting frustrated and going away. Well, that's not how to think about it at all in terms of your perception. What you really need to keep in mind is DoD is made up of individuals, including thousands of program managers, scientists, technologists, both civilian and military. And what I'm going to emphasize here is keying in on communicating and building connections and partnerships with individuals in DoD. But they're also working with prime contractors and other support contractors, many big companies, and I don't have individual photos here, but remember, corporations are people too, as some people might say. But what they have in common is they are all directly and indirectly working to serve the needs of the warfighter, the individuals on the front line protecting our country and fighting the enemies overseas and everywhere else. So who is Techlink? Well, we're the primary defense-wide partnership intermediary for DoD for nationwide technology transfer and transition. We currently facilitate about 60% of all of DoD's patent license agreements, and we've so far done over 450 of those for more than 1,000 patents. We also help with other DoD technology partnerships. We've had a total of over 1,500 partnerships, 1,100 of those with DoD. And we did an economic impact assessment that was managed independently back in 2012 and had over $3 billion in total economic impact. But also nationwide, my primary role is helping DoD with SBIR and STTR support, focused primarily on phase 2, phase 3, and transition of those technologies, that is, getting the end results into DoD programs where they can support warfighter needs or get into acquisition, and especially dual use, that is, both civilian and military applications. We also provide additional SBIR support for members of the Advanced Power and Energy Cluster, and we've directly assisted in companies in winning over $200 million in SBIR and STTR awards. We also do a few extra things for the Air Force. One of the things we're going to be reporting on in DC in a couple of weeks is we've concluded the largest ever study of SBIR and STTR economic impacts for the Air Force. And Techlink is based at Montana State University in Bozeman. So we're out in the boonies, but we work harder to prove our value. So some of the topics we're going to cover today, and again, this is a torrent of information, so I'll just skim the surface quickly, is finding existing R&D opportunities. I'll put a lot of emphasis on SBIR and STTR because that's a really good opportunity for most small technology-based firms who are developing new products, and especially DoD SBIR, which is what we're expecting here today. The Rapid Innovation Fund is a big opportunity that's open right now. Working with PTACs, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, is also very important. FedBizOps, or FBO.gov, is something else I'll touch on. Broad Agency Announcements, or BAA, is very valuable and something to look for. One in particular for the water cluster would be the Army Corps of Engineers Engineering R&D Center, BAA. That's out year-round. SOCOM is a very special target of interest for companies developing practical technologies because they're different in how they work. And I'm going to hit on partnering for success, which is critically important for a small business. Things like Cooperative R&D Agreements, or CRADAs, Test Service Agreements, TSAs, and how to turn these CRADAs into real opportunities for you. It's really all about the attitude going into this. And how to find the right DoD lab and especially the right researcher to work with. That's the critical thing, finding the right people to connect with. Working with prime contractors and how to find an interested technologist or program manager at those primes. And then leveraging existing technologies through patent license agreements. And finally end with Q&A. So quickly overviewing SBIR, it's a federally mandated program, currently about $2.3 billion total for SBIR, set at 2.9% of the extramural R&D budget for agencies spending more than $100 million on that, and it's set to grow still more to 3.2%. And STTR much, much smaller. It's currently at 0.4% of that extramural budget, but only for agencies spending more than $1 billion in extramural R&D. And the goal for these is commercialization of new innovations. It's not just doing R&D. You need to commercialize it, get it out into the market, so the results will bring in more tax revenue for the government and pay for the SBIR programs. It's a three-phase program. Its phase one is feasibility study, proving the feasibility of your idea, which is typically 6 months, maybe 80 to 150,000, sometimes up to 225,000, sometimes even more. Phase two, if you get phase one, normally you can compete then for phase two, which is proof of principle or prototype, which is typically 2 year and up to $1 million, sometimes $1.5 million. And phase three is the goal. It's the commercialization or the transition to DoD. Now, there is no SBIR funding for phase three. It's a different color of money. It could be commercial sales. It could be government contract or procurement, including, very, very importantly, sole source contracts. And there's no contract limit if you're working with the government. And some of the agencies do phase two enhancements or other interim or additional type funding to help you get to that phase three. The eligibility is you have to be a small business that is less than 500 employees, including all affiliates. There's been some VC ownership issues, a little complicated to go into unless you really are owned by a VC. You have to be for-profit and at least 51% owned and controlled by U.S. individuals. Again, there's been some VC issues, venture capitalist ownership issues. The primary employment of the principal investigator must be with the small business firm at the time of the award, not at the time of the proposal submission and during the conduct of the proposed effort. Although with STTR, some of the agencies allow the principal investigator to be at the research institution, which is typically a university. And all work must be done in the U.S. Now that 500 employee deal sounds intimidating to some folks. Well, here's just some examples for NASA, very high-tech SBIR program. And you can see from here that more than half of all awardees, at least at the time this was done, were fewer than 10 employees. And about a third of them are first-time phase one awardees. So chances are good for newcomers. It's a highly competitive program. Only about 1 in 6 phase one proposals win awards. If you're new to it, if you're a newbie, your odds are going to be a little tougher. It's not easy to write a proposal. Plan on 40 to 60 hours or a lot more. Just write a decent proposal, not necessarily winning proposal. And most companies do lose money during phase one because they're putting in a lot of extra effort. Maybe they didn't set up appropriate indirect rates or other reasons. They're trying very hard to succeed and win phase two because you still have to prove the feasibility of your idea and compete for that phase two, which is, like I said, up to $1 million for many agencies. And only about 40% of phase one awardees go on to win phase two. There are some critical advantages for this program. First, it's not a loan, no repayment required. There's no loss of equity ownership. That is, it's not like a venture investment or angel investment. It can be very high risk with high payoff innovation, something venture capitalists don't invest in. And there are critically some preferences, including sole source contracts for follow-on government funding or procurement, and people really need to keep that in mind. That is something we emphasize. That is the ultimate value of SBIR in many cases. But these follow-on sole source are not required. There's no guarantee. You have to work hard to get these. And your overall chances are of winning are about 1 in 6. I'm calling that an advantage right now because compared to other things like venture capital, your chance of getting VC is much less than 1%. and other opportunities for funding are also a lot smaller than this. The disadvantages: government contracts and accounting are onerous. It's difficult, and it's what intimidates a lot of people and keeps them out of the program. It's a slow process, 3 to 5 years through phase 2, and takes 4 to 9 months from submission of proposal to the start of your phase 1 if you win. So it's not appropriate if whatever you're doing has a real short window of opportunity to get to market. It does require R&D capability and good proposal writing skills, and those are great reasons to partner with university scientists, something we recommend highly for SBIR phase 1s. You have to propose what the agencies are asking for. And for contracting agencies, and I'm going to describe those in the subsequent slides, this is very, very specific. NASA and DoD are asking for specific technology development. And there's a lot more leeway for the granting agencies, which again I'll describe shortly. NSF and NIH are examples of granting agencies that just say something very broadly, what they want you to develop. Now, to be successful in SBIR, you require, first of all, the I of SBIR is innovation, a new product or technology, or a new application of existing technology. There has to be research involved. This can be research of the, or has to be research of the feasibility of your idea in phase 1, but it is not market research, and it's not strictly product development. And there have to be commercial applications. For the granting agencies especially, there has to be a societal need that you describe and a strong commercial potential, and or there has to be a specific agency need, like for DoD, and dual use, meaning both civilian and military, or civilian and agency applications. Just for examples of what you can strive for, here's some companies. Everybody knows Sonicare, toothbrush. This was started as a company called Gemtech. In 1990, they got a $50,000 phase 1 from NIH for a sonic brush. In 1992, they got phase 2 for $500,000. By 1995, they were so successful, they changed their name to Optiva. And by the year 2000, Optiva had over 600 employees and $175 million in annual sales when they were acquired by Philips, and we lost track of what the Sonicare sales became. But, you know, they made out well from that small start. Here's another company. Everybody probably knows Roomba. Some of you have them. And a few of you probably know its ugly father above it, the PackBot. These were both developed by a company called iRobot in Bedford, Massachusetts, which started with 29 DoD, SBIR, and STTR awards between 2000 and 2008. Total value of $9 million. These were all for developing the PackBot, various applications of the PackBot, various components, software, etc. But because of that dual use I mentioned earlier, the company wanted to do civilian applications, so they took the capabilities they developed with PackBot and went and built the Roomba, which is very important because by 2010 they had 657 employees, 400 million annual sales, and only 40% of those were to the military, and a $750 million market value. By 2011, their sales were still growing, but 2011 was when we started the Iraq and Afghanistan drawdown, so the need for military robots was dropping quickly. By 2012, their sales had only dropped a bit, though, to 436 million, and only 10% of those sales were military. So they were very, very wise in going for dual use with the civilian applications. In summary, the total annual amounts: 11 agencies participate in SBIR, 5 of those in STTR. About 15% of applicants win phase 1. It can often be higher with STTR. And the phase 2, about 40% of those phase 1 winners go on to win phase 2. Now, The big difference between SBIR and STTR is the subcontracts or subawards. SBIR Phase 1 allows up to 1/3 of your award to be subcontracted, and I put university there in parentheses because I highly encourage working with a university for that Phase 1. And by Phase 2, up to 1/2 is allowed to be subcontracted to university, to Boeing, Raytheon, other small businesses, anyone in the U.S. really. STTR requires at least 30% be subcontracted to a research institution like a university, and the small business has to do a minimum of 40%. So you've also got about 30% of your award to play with to sub-award to others you might need to bring on board for a real successful proposal. Important to know your agency customer and the differences between them. The key agency difference, there's 11 different agencies in SBIR, 5 of them have STTR programs. Each agency manages its own programs, and each of 13 different DoD components manages its own programs, with some coordination by the Office of Secretary of Defense. SBA, Small Business Administration, sets the general rules through their program policy directives based on law set by Congress. Last time, the SBIR Reauthorization Act of 2011, which was inserted in the National Defense Authorization Act. And then the agencies report as required to SBA. These are the agencies ranked more or less by size of their programs. Now, what's really critical here is not the size of their program, the total money they have, but you look at those columns to the far right. Award type, contracts, grants, contracts and grants, and then the review type, line review, peer review, or line and peer review mixes. Those are critical aspects for how you approach the agency, and I'm going to describe that in more detail next. So, grants versus contracts. The contracting agencies, like DoD and NASA, have very focused topics. They want something specific. You have to propose that. They tell you how to do this, what the requirements are, and you have a lot more fiscal, that is, contracting and budgeting requirements. And critically, these are subject to federal acquisition regulations or defense federal acquisition regulations, which restrict communications, the so-called blackout of communication with the technical point of contact, or TPOC, as soon as the solicitation is officially released. The agency is typically the buyer. It's a procurement mechanism for them to get something they don't have, and especially for DoD or NASA, but they also want to see other applications, and these are usually line reviewed, which is the next slide. Granting agencies, on the other hand, like NSF or NIH, put very broad topics. And NIH might say we need a cure for cancer. NSF might say we need broader applications of new products based on nanotechnology. You decide what you're going to do, how you approach it, and what the markets are. These are really just assistance mechanisms to help you get there if they decide your proposal is worthy of funding. You also have more flexibility. It's not a contract. You can go to the program manager sometimes and say, hey, we found something new. We'd like to change a little bit of what we're doing to really go after this new option here. And they might say yes. You can communicate with these program managers anytime as long as they have time to talk to you. And these are usually peer reviewed. Most people know that, but I'll explain in the next slide. Again, that restricted communication with the contracting agencies is critical. So line versus peer review. The contracting agencies want to eventually buy these technologies and see it being dual use. So the reviewers are going to be the program managers, the topic authors, maybe a couple of knowledgeable cohorts. So you are marketing your proposal to them. You need to have personal knowledge of what their needs and culture and many other aspects are. And it's very helpful if you know insider terminology that's related to the programs, to the service, or the agency. The peer review agencies, peer review the markets and approaches are defined by you, the submitter, to meet a societal need of interest to the agency. They send these reviews, these proposals out for review by outside experts who are usually university faculty scientists. Keep that in mind for how you want to structure your proposal if it's going to be reviewed by academics. Some of the agencies, like NSF, will use a separate business review panel, but the agency program manager is the one who makes the final decision based on those outside reviews. Here's a timeline to keep in mind. This is an ideal case. You find a topic, you write your proposal and submit it. Maybe 4 or 6 months later, you get a Phase 1 award. At that time, you start attracting the interest of some companies you want to work with, like a prime contractor or commercial partner, and they agree to work with you as a subcontractor in Phase 2. You submit that proposal after 6 months. Then a few months later, you get that Phase 2 award, lasts 2 years. Maybe a few months after the end of that, you get a Phase 2 enhancement. By year 5, you may be able to get your initial product out into the market, which is certainly feasible if it's software. But more often than not, it takes much longer, typically about 8 years, to go through this process to get ready for commercialization. So going into DoD, SBIR, and STTR, DoD's real focus is on the warfighter, how to serve them, how to get products they need, and there's also some additional requirements for the services. The topics can cover almost any technology area. For example, the Army has a lot of medical topics. The Defense Health Program, which was more recent, is bringing out a lot of medical topics now. DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, really seeks the most cutting-edge advanced technology. Very often that can be something long-term for insertion into the military. But you, the applicant, would need to show a strong connection to the end users in the services, because a lot of these program managers at DARPA come out of academia or industry serving just 4 years, and they may not have any real strong connections to the military itself, so they want to see you showing how you can get it to serve military needs. Now also, most of these program managers serve just 4 years, so they're under pressure to get something successful quickly. They often adopt other Phase 2 proposals that were initially funded as Phase 1s by other DoD components or other agencies. SOCOM is on the other side of that. They just want practical technology that can be deployed quickly. If you can propose something less than the normal length of SBIR proposal time limits and at less money, they'll really like that. Other services, Army, Navy, Air Force, are kind of in between. Navy's had the most successful Phase 3 programs so far. The other services are struggling to catch up and doing a lot of changes to improve their transition rates of their SBIR technologies. Here's a chart. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. The number of DoD components participating seems to change every year. The number doing STTR changes year to year. And these are just some statistics from a few years ago, just to give you some idea. Most people would look at these columns to look at, towards the far right, the award rates, like 16, 20%. Those are going to change a lot year to year. The STTR award rate, for example, for Missile Defense Agency at 75%, that was a fluke. When the upper management at MDA saw that, they said, heads are going to roll. We're not going to let that happen again. More important for a newcomer to the program is the number of Phase 1 awards per topic. if there are fewer Phase 1 awards, like let's say it's less than 2 per topic, that means it's harder for a newcomer to get attention. If there's 3 or 4 awards per topic, that really means it's open to new ideas and high-risk approaches. You'll also see DARPA actually had more Phase 2 awards than Phase 1 awards. That's because they're doing adoptions of other agencies' SBIRs and STTRs. Doing your homework. This is a lot of in-depth stuff. You'll get this when you download a copy of this presentation. But, go to the website for DoD, review their schedule and current solicitations and topics. If you find a topic, review the Q&A, which is at that site. To do homework, really, you want to look at past solicitations for similar topics at this SBIR Gateway website and review awards from those topics. Usually I would have said go to the DoD website, but they just improved it and don't have those awards listed at the DoD website anymore. But there's a couple of other places, the SBIR.gov. Navy has a good database of their own awards, as does the Air Force. If you really want to get in depth, go and download the Defense Research Development Test and Engineering Budget Justifications. The links are here. Find out what they're saying about specific programs that might be mentioned in an SBIR topic, specific technologies and where they're being used, what the budget projections are, and what they say they've done and what they plan to do. You can request a DoD SBIR background research paper that I wrote a few years back and have updated that goes in depth into how to do this research and the approaches you should take, especially in how you talk to the listed technical point of contact, which has to be before the blackout date to discuss this. Really, reading the instructions is critical. You have to read the DoD general instructions, and each DoD component has separate instructions that have some variations that override some of the specifics on the general instructions. Start writing a proposal if you want, but review the instructions again. It's important, it's critical that you do exactly what's required in these instructions or you'll get kicked out without review. Now here's a chart I can email anyone who requests. It's a solicitation schedule with information. You see the columns going generally from the biggest programs down to more or less the smaller ones. Important in here is their process, the internal reviews and contract awards or external peer reviews and grant awards, size of their Phase 1 and Phase 2. In bold letters here are the solicitations that are currently open. DoD currently has the 2015.2 and 2015.B SBIR and STTR solicitations open. They officially opened May 22nd, which means the blackout has begun. You can no longer talk specifically to the technical point of contact, which puts you at a slight disadvantage here. But again, this is a small solicitation compared to DoD's 2015.1 solicitation. NIH, or Health and Human Services, will be releasing their big omnibus solicitation this coming June, and they will have various submission dates throughout the year. And they also send out other requests for applications and program announcements throughout the year. The other big one that's open right now is NSF. You still have time to submit proposals for that, so request this chart. It's very useful for getting information and the links for this. The Rapid Innovation Fund is a very critical thing for a lot of small businesses. It was instituted by Congress about 4 years ago in the National Defense Authorization Act, originally intended to help DoD SBIR transition these projects to warfighter use. Because it was instituted by Congress, the funding has to be appropriated each year. And there is some initial resistance by a few people in DoD, but they've made it a pretty effective program since then. The specific small business preference is important here. It's not a small business set-aside. There will be some large companies and universities winning some of these RIF awards. And there's not really a specific SBIR, STTR preference in here, although sometimes it is mentioned. The projects have to meet critical DoD needs, which are specified now in the topics in the RIF solicitation. What a lot of companies really like is these are maximum $3 million awards for up to 24 months to complete the project. You start at what's called technology readiness level, or TRL 6 to 7, which is basically a prototype, and it should be ready for use or transition to military applications by the end of that 2 years. It's also a simplified submission procedure. All you need to submit is a 3-page white paper and quad chart, which I'll show you next, although that makes it difficult for companies because getting your information in that short a space is tough. Those who are invited for full proposals have a very high odds of winning, in the order of 80 to 90%. Here's the sample quad chart, the template that they include in the RIF solicitation. The current RIF solicitation is at this link, defenseinnovationmarketplace.mil/RIF. I urge you, if you want to look at this, to see their presentation, the past awards, and more information there. The initial proposals, the white paper and quad chart, are due June 15th, so you do have time. They have a total of $225 million available, split between the different services and defense-wide priorities. The keys to winning here. First, you don't have a lot of space to write this, so it's got to be clear, compelling, concise proposal with good graphics and information in your quad chart. More importantly, you need strong support from relevant DoD program managers and or prime contractors who are going to make the difference in winning a RIF award or not. There are several water-related topics in the current RIF. One from the Navy, efficiently scavenge water. This is very important for the Marine Corps. Army has a couple of water-related topics, water purification and water quality monitoring, but there's hundreds of other topics in this current RIF solicitation. If you're not specifically interested in these, look through and see what might be a good fit, and if you have good connections or can make some good connections to be competitive for this. Next is the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, the PTACs. If you're wherever you are, whatever state you're in, you can find your local PTAC at aptac.us.org. These are funded by Defense Logistics Agency. They help small businesses with government contracting. Usually their services are free. Some might be a minimal charge. They can help with federal, state, and local government contracting opportunities, as well as subcontracting opportunities to prime contractors. They can also help you with some of the required registrations and regulations and a lot more. Bid Match is one of the services I highly recommend. It's an automated internet-based service to link you up to services, opportunities that match the specific criteria you set, which may be keywords, specific regions, whatever your preferences are as a small business, 8A, service disabled, veteran owned, etc. And it goes well beyond FedBizOps, fbo.gov. FedBizOps is something I mentioned earlier. This is where most of the government contracting and grant opportunities are placed. fbo.gov, or just Google FedBizOps, it'll take you right there. It's a searchable database of the current opportunities in the federal government only. And when you register and get in there, you can set up a search agent to automatically send you emails whenever there's an opportunity that matches whatever criteria you set up. The PTAC is much more in-depth, can match you up with a lot more and help you navigate what can be fairly complicated in FedBizOps. So you might talk to them if you can, or just try doing FedBizOps and tailor your search words and search criteria a few times to get what you're looking for. Broad agency announcements. These are the announcements set by federal agencies for R&D contracting opportunities that may be of interest to the agency. You can find them at FedBizOps, and you can find them at the specific agency websites, like NRL, Naval Research Lab will have their BAAs at their website. For example, these are different than requests for information, where they may be just looking for a distant future need and may not have money immediately. And it's not a request for proposal, an RFP, which is to buy or develop something very specific in terms of products or services, often commodities. Granting agencies like DOE may use FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement. A lot of the DoD components have a standing BAA. These are usually issued annually and renewed or updated annually, describing the areas of interest for them, for their R&D. Many times they just request you submit a simple white paper to see if what you propose or if your concept is of interest to that agency. Many times they list a technical point of contact that you want to send your white paper to or discuss this with. And these are very often open year-round. You can submit a white paper anytime, and if they like it, they may suggest you submit a full proposal and give you the instructions on what's required on that. For the group here, one of them that may be of specific interest is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Engineering Research and Development Center, BAA. You should learn about this group at their website here. They have a number of different labs you can see here scattered around the country. Here's the links for their broad agency announcement that's updated periodically. But you can see at the bottom their interests include hydraulics, coastal engineering, oceanography, aquatic plants, water quality, and much more that may be of interest to a lot of you here at the webinar. So take a look at that. They list technical points of contact, and very often we recommend trying to collaborate with these folks that I'll talk about shortly. SOCOM, the Special Operations Command, is different in how they operate. They operate and they issue contracts independently from the other services, and they're able to move fast, as you might expect from special forces, in acquiring the needed technologies and products. They award about $3 billion in contracts each year. The contact point for you would be the TILO, the Technology and Industry Liaison Office, which is the conduit between industry and academia and SOCOM. Here's their portal to submit your ideas and some guidelines on what to submit. Look first at their capability areas of interest. Short white paper, 35 pages, that is way maximum. I'd recommend more like 15, 20 pages max, but you need a brief, compelling synopsis to attract their attention to actually read all of your pages. There's no official format, but you need to know how your idea, your product is unique, and what's the value proposition to SOCOM, how it's going to help them. Include tech specifications, any test results, any previous government contracts, or government control statements. Don't include things like your company overview, your personal biography, or copies of patents. And by all means, don't use the SOCOM logo in there. They don't want to see you using that because you're not authorized. And you'll usually hear back within 30 days on this. Now, partnering for success is critical for small businesses. Why? To build your capabilities, leverage resources from many different areas, because even if you think you can do it all, a lack of a critical capability is going to be obvious to a reviewer. You got to build your connections, customer, agency, markets, other resources, like prime contractors who may be your ultimate customer. And build your credibility above all, because you may be known by the company you keep. Partnering with federal labs is a very important aspect. There's inventions available to license, patent license agreements, research collaborations, which is something I really like to emphasize through CRADAs, the Cooperative R&D Agreements, special testing. Some of these labs have equipment for testing available nowhere else in the world. You can access that through a relatively low-cost test service agreement. And they have other mechanisms, material transfer agreements, work for others, etc. You can get onto the Federal Laboratory Consortium website and search for available technologies or search for capabilities at the various federal labs at these websites. There are hundreds of federal labs out there. CRADAs, the Cooperative R&D Agreement, can help you tie into really valuable, significant R&D at little or no cost. You can utilize some specific R&D capability available nowhere else. And really, for a small business, if someone sees in a proposal from you that you have a CRADA, a formal agreement with some big lab like Naval Research Lab, Army Research Lab, or whatever, they're going to suddenly raise their perception of you based on your perceived credibility because of that partnership. More importantly, you become more familiar with the agency and their needs and culture, and they become familiar with you and your capabilities, which can really bring some advantages, because that will often open doors for other funding opportunities. I had a client company I introduced to the Army Institute for Surgical Research because they had a compound that would help prevent biofilm formation, which is a really big issue for wounds and chronic wounds from bed sores, etc., healing in serious injury. The couple of days after I introduced this company to a researcher at the Institute for Surgical Research, that researcher called back, said, hey, there's a broad agency announcement out you really should apply to. We'd like to work with you on this as a test site for this compound. Proposals due Monday. This was Friday. Somehow they got a proposal out and ended up the company won an award for $500,000 per year for up to 5 years, and followed that up with many other awards and tremendous company growth and opportunities. Others use the insight from these agency contacts under their CRADA to find out what their customer needed on something else, like a Phase 2 SBIR proposal, which they credit with winning the Phase 2. Now, the federal law prohibits any payment to a company under a CRADA, and sometimes you have to pay some minimal amount for the services. If it's under an SBIR, you can actually do this in some cases as a subcontract to the lab. How to find DoD technologists. This is very important for you. Go to the SBIR gateway and do a search in their closed SBIR topics at DoD topics. This is the only place where you can find specific contact info for the listed technical point of contact on these past closed topics. You want to do your homework, like I talked about before, to review the past awards, the company websites, their abstracts, etc. And once you do that research, you call the listed point of contact if he or she is still there, and approach them with the idea, hey, is this still an ongoing issue for you? We'd really like to help you solve that problem because we've got a technology approach that may fit well. And we want to talk about collaboration, maybe via a CRADA. Now, important that you don't act like you're looking for money, because their protective walls will go up immediately. If you're there to help them, they really will engage with you. And once they see that you're serious about helping them and you've got a good technology approach, they may do like they've done with other clients and help you find some relevant funding, sometimes big funding. Partnering with prime contractors is important too, because they are typically the builder of major systems and platforms, like the Joint Strike Fighter. The prime contractors like Boeing, Raytheon, and others really do seek out small businesses, especially SBIR companies, for partnering. You can see their representatives at any major SBIR conference, and very often if they would think you've got a good idea, they'll provide a letter of support, and they can even be your subcontractor, typically in phase 2. Boeing and Lockheed send out regular emails listing a large number of points of contact who are interested in specific SBIR topics. You can contact these folks here to find out who these points of contact are for each solicitation. Get on their mailing list, and you'll know who specifically is interested in those technologies that you may be interested in. Other prime contractors, you might just look at their small business liaison office, the SBLOs, or other names. If you do subcontract to them, it's not significant for them, but there are real values to that, because there are future contract opportunities for you, and they may even in the future look at buying you, which could be very profitable. Of course, you want to have a warning, the caveat of get professional advice on intellectual property, SBIR data rights, the so-called 7018 clause, before you sign any agreements with them. And of course, from the DoD perspective, partnering with prime shows your intent to transition your technology and the capability to do so. Technology licensing, there's a lot of opportunities to acquire things that are already developed and patented at huge expense at these federal labs, and they are required to make an effort to transfer this technology usually at a small fraction of the cost of development or even the patent costs. You can get exclusive, partially exclusive, non-exclusive patent license agreements. Techlink, we review and evaluate all DoD patents, about 400 to 600 of which are issued each year by DoD labs. We have a repository of about 10,000 patents, and those with the best commercial applications, we market those, and we assist companies who are interested in licensees at no charge to the company or the lab. So keys to long-term success: network, go to conferences that are relevant to your industry, collaborate with labs, partner with them and with university researchers. Working with university researchers is the biggest single factor in winning SBIR and STTR. Partner with federal labs, especially if that agency is your target customer. Work with prime contractors where they're relevant and other partners. Work especially with your customers, the agencies like DoD, to create new opportunities, because above all, the most successful firms are the ones who are best at partnering. Here's my contact information if you have questions, and now I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ray. If anyone out there has any questions, you can feel free to type those, or you can also do a little hand raise. You have a button that will raise a hand, and I can unmute you, certainly. While we're talking here, you have Ray's contact information on the screen. Ray has been a great help to many, many of our member companies along the way over the last, I don't know, we've probably been working together for 7 years now. I don't see any questions coming through. I'm sure people are kind of trying to digest this information, Ray, because you gave such a nice, robust presentation. So,
overwhelming.
What else? Yeah. Well, you know, word choice, I guess. All right. So I will thank you again, Ray. Thank you to Karen Frost as well at the Water Council for putting this webinar on. And just a note that Karen will be sending a follow-up email to all of the attendees with a link to this recording and this presentation, so that you can go back and look at all of this really useful information. So again, thanks to our presenters, Karen Frost from the Water Council, and to Ray Friesenhahn from Techlink If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us along the way. You have all of our contact information now. So thanks so much, Ray. We really appreciated having you on the line. And Karen, thanks so much for hosting the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Signing out.
Contact me with follow-up questions and to get a copy of the presentation and the documents I mentioned.
Very good. Thanks so much. We'll sign off now.